Chapter 180. The old man had seen this familiar face since he was a child. Li did not put on the airs of a county lieutenant and was the head of the Li family village. The white-haired old man felt like he was seeing the child from the Li family again. The sense of familiarity returned and he was no longer afraid, so he began to talk freely. The old man stroked his beard, and his wrinkled face revealed a look of reminiscence. This matter started more than 10 years ago, on the night you were born. The county yamen clerk beside Li twitched his mouth when he saw the old man immersed in his memories. Seeing that the county lieutenant was listening attentively, he shut his mouth. At this time, the fear in the hearts of the Li family villagers gradually dissipated, and they slowly gathered around. At that time, I often saw the county lieutenant sitting at the door reading. When I was a child, I knew that Li, county lieutenant, would definitely be successful in the future. County lieutenant, do you still remember when my son fought with you when he was a child and I beat him half to death? The villagers did not know when it started, but their fear had disappeared and they began to talk at once. However, they still addressed Li as county lieutenant and were no longer as casual as before. From the messy information they revealed, Li was able to sort out many things. The original owner of this body grew up in the Li family village. His mother passed away when he was young, and his father raised him alone until he was a teenager before he passed away due to illness. The father of the original owner of this body was the only county scholar in the village. He had repeatedly failed in the imperial examinations and seemed to be disheartened. He placed all his hopes on the next generation and taught Li strictly from a young age. As a result, the young Li was the only one of his age who could read and write. Later, Li Xiaoxia passed away due to illness, and the few acres of land that he owned were taken care of by the villagers. Every household would take turns to help him out. This was also because Li Xiaoxia was the only scholar in the village. Whenever a family needed to write a letter, he would write it for them. When a new wife gave birth to a child, she would ask him for help when it came time to name the child. She remembered his kindness and took good care of the child. Of course, the fact that the Li family's son was diligent in his studies was also a big part of the reason. At the age of 17, he was able to pass the elementary scholar examinations, which gave the Li family a lot of faith. If he was lucky enough to pass the imperial examinations in the future, he would be appointed as an official by the imperial court. When the villagers went out, they would be able to talk to others with their backs straight. However, this idea was completely shattered a few months ago. The child of the Li family, who was the hope of the entire village, had inexplicably gone mad. After he ran out of the village, he never came back. Even the government couldn't find him. The old man had originally planned to wait until the beginning of next year. If he had not returned by then, he would report his disappearance to the authorities and have his household register revoked. Who would have thought that when he reappeared in the village, he would suddenly transform into the county magistrate? The villagers of the Li family village, including the old man, were both surprised and delighted. The county magistrate, who was in charge of dozens of villages in Anxi County, came from their Li family village. With such a powerful backer, they would no longer have to worry about being bullied by other villages. If anything happened, they would also have someone in the county government who could speak up for them. Some of the villagers were already feeling elated. Watching the villagers chatter on for almost 2 hours, the scribe's legs had gone numb. However, when he saw that the county magistrate was still patiently listening to them, he could only groan in his heart. Li listened patiently, but he felt a little strange. In the time travel novels he had read before, when someone traveled to ancient times, he would always have a headache, and then he would get all the memories of the original owner of his body. Obviously, this law did not apply to him. Except for an inexplicable sense of familiarity with the Li family village and these villagers, Li could not even remember their names. However, the people of this era were still very easy to fool. An excuse of amnesia could be a good excuse, which saved him a lot of trouble. Thinking of the situation when he woke up in that room, he didn't know what happened to the original owner of his body. When he woke up, he was inexplicably replaced by him. Thinking about it carefully, it was more likely that he had starved to death. After all, the disaster year had just passed, and the situation here was better than that of the Willow Leaf village. However, everyone must be living a hard life. Even if they were starving, a scholar who only knew how to read books would not take the initiative to ask for help. Boy, there was a drought last year and the land didn't produce much food. The tax. Seeming to think of something, the old man looked embarrassed and looked at him. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. The land of the Li family village all belonged to the state before. Every year at a fixed time the government would send people to collect taxes. However, the emperor was benevolent and sympathized with several prefectures that suffered from drought, so they were exempted from taxes for 2 years. Relying on the food stored at home, they could live a good life. But now that the emperor had given these lands to others, they didn't need to pay taxes to the government anymore. Naturally, the excuse of exemption from taxes was useless. Li Yi knew what the old man wanted to say. He said with a smile, "Thank you for taking care of me these years. I can't repay you. You don't need to mention the tax in the future." Hearing this, the scribe was stunned. County Magistrate Li didn't want to collect taxes? This was hundreds of acres of fertile land, and the annual tax was not small. How could County Magistrate Li just say no to it? How can this be? Hearing this, the old man was also shocked. He just wanted Li Yi to be considerate of the disaster and reduce the tax or postpone the collection. He didn't expect that Li Yi would casually exempt the tax. In other words, all the output of the land would belong to the farmers in the future? Why not? If it weren't for the help of the villagers, there wouldn't be Li Yi today. Uncle Li, you don't need to say more. It's settled. Although 100 acres of land was not a small amount, the output of food was far less than that of the later generations. Relying on the business of ruidu and spirits, the daily income was rolling in, and the tax was not a big deal. Of course, the villagers of the Li family village were kind to the original owner of this body. If he hadn't grown up in the Li family village, he wouldn't have been so generous. Knowing that they didn't have to pay taxes in the future, the villagers of the Li family village were shocked, and then their expressions turned into ecstasy. If it weren't for Li Yi stopping them, they would have kowtowed to him. After coming out of the Li family village, Li Yi clearly felt relieved in his heart. Perhaps it was because of this body, even though his soul came from another spacetime and had nothing to do with this place, that inexplicable sense of familiarity and intimacy was unbreakable. As long as he could do something for these people within his capabilities, he would feel a little bit of comfort in his heart. Chapter 181. Your movements are so weak. Did you not eat enough? How many times have I told you that you have to show your imposing manner with this move? Where is your imposing manner? After another complete set of moves, Li Yi sat down on the chair and did not want to get up again. Lu Rui looked at him seriously with her hands behind her back. You have rested 3 times in 2 hours. Do you still want to be a martial arts master? Get up and continue. Let me rest a little more. Just a little more? Becoming a peerless master was not something that could be achieved overnight. Only 2 hours had passed, and Li Yi was already lying on the chair, unwilling to even move a finger. Looking up, he saw Lu Rui looking down at him like a strict teacher. Li Yi sighed and said, "A girl who likes to smile will not have bad luck. Rui, you should smile more." Li Yi had a nagging feeling that Lu Rui had found the joy of being a master through him. She would not stop until she tortured him until he could not move. Although the effects were surprisingly good, to the point that one day was equivalent to several days before, with his combat strength steadily increasing, the process was just too torturous. It's fine if you don't want to practice. How about we have a spar and see how much you have improved these days? Lu Rui looked down at him and said lightly, "I remember that I only told half of the story of the painted skin yesterday. How about we finish it now?" Sparring with her was just giving her a chance to beat him up. Li Yi was not that stupid, so he said it out of desperation. Lu Rui felt it was a pity that she could not spar with Li Yi. However, she was actually more interested in the ghost stories he told. Leaning against the willow tree by the wall, she said, "Go ahead." Xuanhuan was watching from the side. When she heard that the son-in-law was going to tell the story of the painted skin, she immediately hid far away and did not dare to come over. Listening to the ghost stories from the son-in-law yesterday, she was so scared that she could not sleep all night. Now she did not dare to listen anymore. Yesterday he had told Lu Rui the story of strange tales from a Chinese studio to prevent her from continuing to abuse him. Li Yi changed to a more comfortable position as the strange tales from a Chinese studio surfaced in his mind. After pondering for a moment, he slowly began speaking. When he entered the study, he found that the doors and windows were all closed. He tiptoed to the window and peeked through the crack. He was so scared that his hair stood on end. He saw a hideous evil ghost with a green face and teeth like saws. He was drawing on a piece of human skin on the bed with a colored pen. After drawing, he lifted the human skin and put it on his body like a piece of clothing. A gust of autumn wind blew, bringing with it a slight chill. Li Yi could not help but shiver. When he read the contents of the book, he would have a feeling that he was there, especially when he was describing the female ghost. In his mind, a vivid image had already appeared. The ferocious and terrifying evil ghost, with a green face and teeth like saws, laid on the bed with a piece of human skin, holding a colored pen and drawing on the human skin. Suddenly he felt a chill run down his spine and hurriedly sat up. "Why did you stop?" Lu Rui was listening with interest. Seeing that he suddenly stopped talking, she asked. "I feel that if I want to become a martial arts master, I need to practice diligently. I can't slack off." Li Yi felt his body suddenly filled with strength. He looked up at her and said righteously, "You must be more careful when you carry out your duties. The position of the county lieutenant is different from other jobs. Although you don't need to do it yourself, it is still somewhat dangerous." In the courtyard, Lu Rui helped Li Yi straighten the collar of the county lieutenant uniform and reminded him in a low voice. Although County Magistrate Lu generously gave him a month's vacation, he had to go to work eventually. If he delayed it any longer, the higher-ups would inevitably blame him. After a long period of special training from Lu Rui, the present Li Yi no longer looked like a scholar. Although he was still far from being strong and powerful, the azure-colored official robes he wore made him look valiant and valiant. "Uncle Fong, I'll leave my husband to you in the future." After helping Li Yi straighten his clothes, she turned around and said to Fong. Fong was 1 generation older than Lu's sister Rui, but Li Yi got along with him more casually. One of them called him Fong, while the other called him Uncle Fong, which might sound strange to outsiders. "Don't worry, eldest Mississippi. As long as I'm here, no one can touch the son-in-law." Fong patted his chest and promised. If he didn't go to Rui Square to keep watch, he would usually be idle at home. Now that the son-in-law was going to the Yamen and the manager of Rui Square was changed, he would continue to stay by Li Yi's side. In this regard, Fong was somewhat looking forward to it. He was very bored running back and forth between the stockade village and the shop every day. He had never been to the Yamen, but he thought that the life there should be much more interesting than now. Lu Rui was very confident in Fong's skills. With him by her side, as long as they didn't encounter a real master, they should have no problem dealing with ordinary thieves or even those so-called heroes of the underworld. "I'm leaving." Li Yi waved at them and walked out of the courtyard. In the Anxi County Yamen, the spacious ceremonial door that only opened a few times a year opened. County Magistrate Lu, who hadn't been seen for a long time, walked out of the door under the escort of many Yamen runners and officials. "County Lieutenant Li, I've been looking forward to seeing you," County Magistrate Lu said with a smile to the young man in the county lieutenant uniform who was walking towards him after walking out of the ceremonial door. Behind County Magistrate Lu, 2 men in the same official uniform looked confused. They couldn't figure out County Magistrate Lu's attitude towards the newly appointed county lieutenant. During the year, the ceremonial door of the county yamen was usually closed. An exception would be made when a new official arrived or when an official of the same or higher rank came to visit. County Magistrate Lu's action showed that he attached enough importance to County Lieutenant Li. "Lord Lu, I'm sorry to keep you waiting for me." Li also cupped his hands and said. County Magistrate Lu just smiled and didn't continue this topic. He turned around and pointed at the 2 men, introducing them. "County Lieutenant Li, please allow me to introduce you to County Lieutenant Li. This is County Magistrate Wang, and this is Secretary Zheng. We'll be colleagues from now on." County Magistrate Wang and County Magistrate Lu were about the same age. With a big belly, he looked like a middle-aged plump man. Secretary Zheng looked a little older and had a skinny figure. When he stood beside County Magistrate Wang, he would be easily overlooked. "County Magistrate Wang, Secretary Zheng. It's my first time here. Please take care of me in the future." Li cupped his hands and said politely. "We're all colleagues. We should take care of each other." Since County Magistrate Lu was so polite to County Lieutenant Li, the 2 second-in-command and third-in-command of the county yamen naturally didn't dare to put on airs. Before today they had also heard a couple of things about County Lieutenant Li. It was said that County Lieutenant Li was originally a scholar. Because of one of his essays, he was appointed by His Majesty and replaced the position of County Lieutenant Zhou and became the new County Lieutenant of Anxi. A few days ago he came to the county yamen once and resolutely solved 2 difficult cases, which made a group of yamen runners talk about it for several days. At that time, the 2 just felt that County Lieutenant Li had some ability. They originally thought that he was just a scholar who was occasionally favored by the emperor. But seeing County Magistrate Lu's attitude today, it seemed that there was something about County Lieutenant Li that they didn't know. Chapter 182. Today was the first day that County Magistrate Li took office, so County Magistrate Lu naturally introduced the important officials in the county government to him. Li Yi greeted County Magistrate Wang and Secretary Zheng politely, so that they could be considered acquaintances. As for the other low-ranking officials, they had to take the initiative to greet him. After a solemn introduction, County Magistrate Lu took Li Yi to the office and the inner house. The inner house was located in the back hall of the county government, which was divided into several separate courtyards for the officials' family members to live in. However, in the entire county government, only 4 people, including Li Yi, had this privilege. Before Li Yi came, County Magistrate Lu had already ordered people to clean it spotless. According to the regulations, officials could not live in the county government with their family members until they had been in office for 3 years. However, even without this regulation, Rui would not come here. Li Yi did not like the atmosphere in the county government, so he would rather go back to Rui Square than live here. 3 groups of yamen runners had already lined up neatly. The county magistrate was in charge of the public security of the county, and also the direct superior of these yamen runners. Among them, when the county magistrate tried a case, the officers who stood on both sides of the court to maintain discipline knew Li Yi. Thinking of the scene when County Magistrate Li tried a case in the court that day, they looked at him with admiration in their eyes. And among those constables, some of them had seen him before. No one had expected that this weak scholar, whom they had seen several times, would become their immediate superior in the blink of an eye. Although they did not witness it with their own eyes, they had heard from some people what happened when County Magistrate Li tried a case that day. At this time, there were more doubts and curiosity in their eyes. However, in front of the County Magistrate Lu, they still had to show respect on their faces. As the head of a county, County Magistrate Lu was quite busy in daily affairs, so it was impossible for him to accompany Li Yi all the time. Therefore, he roughly showed him the county government, and as for the more detailed things, he gave them to a clever yamen runner. "Sir, do you want me to show you around the county office?" The bailiff looked at Li Yi with a hint of fanaticism in his eyes as he asked with a face full of smiles. Since he saw the means of County Magistrate Li that day, a door of a new world opened for him, and he seemed to be enlightened. When he assisted the county magistrate in handling cases, he made great contributions again and again. Not only did he get several commendations from County Magistrate Lu, but he was also promoted to a small leader of the yamen runners. So far, the little yamen runner who was muddle-headed all day in the yamen had completely disappeared, replaced by a little yamen runner with feelings and ideals. "What's your name?" Li Yi asked casually. The bailiff seemed to be quite quick-witted. "Sir, this subordinate is Lu Yi," the bailiff hastily replied. "Lu Yi?" Li Yi stared blankly for a moment. He thought that Lu Yi's father really knew how to name his son. He waved his hand and said, "There's no need to look around. Take me to the county lieutenant's office." "M'lord, please." Lu Yi responded and led Li Yi through the ceremonial door to the side of the corridor. On both sides of the ceremonial door, there were small rooms, which were the offices of the officials other than the county magistrate. Lu Yi led Li Yi into one of the duty rooms. After walking through the door, he saw a pretty woman sitting on the main seat. The woman raised her head to look at Li Yi, put down the teacup in her hand and said, "I thought you wouldn't come. I'm just a commoner. How dare I defy the imperial edict?" Li Yi sat next to her, poured himself a cup of tea and said indifferently, "If it weren't for the princess constable, he would still be sunbathing in the courtyard of Willow Leaf Village or Rui Square." He got angry when he saw her, but he couldn't do anything, so he felt a little depressed. Seeing this scene, Lu Yi sensibly retreated. When the immortals fought, the mortals suffered. He couldn't get involved in the affairs of these 2 important people. Emingzu took a sip of tea and said lightly, "No matter how lazy you were before you took office, now that you're a county magistrate, you can't be like before." Otherwise what? Are you going to dismiss me?" Li Yi turned to look at her and asked expectantly. The position of county magistrate is very important. If you neglect your duties and cause public order to be unstable, and there are unjust and false cases, you'll be dismissed and investigated. If you're serious. Emingzu looked at him and waved her hand in the air. "Damn it, do you have to go so far?" Li Yi's eyelid twitched, but thinking about it, what she said made sense. A county magistrate was responsible for public order, arresting bandits and investigating cases. None of these were small matters. If you neglect your duties and cause public order to be unstable, bandits run amok, or randomly judge a case and cause someone to die unjustly, it wouldn't just be a case of neglecting your duties. Disregarding human life, just dismissing your duties might not be enough. The prison of Qing in government welcomes you. Raising his head to look at Emingzu, his eyes were extremely complicated. He had thought that he had found a powerful backer, but who knew that this powerful backer dug a big hole for him to jump into? This kind of suffocating and depressing feeling, he couldn't understand it unless he experienced it himself. Speaking of which, this princess was really weird. She didn't want to stay in the imperial palace, nor did she want to be a noble, but came here to be a constable and suffer. She made life difficult for him. More importantly, the emperor actually agreed. Li Yi doubted whether this princess was his biological daughter. Oh, in the month when you didn't take office, there were a lot of cases that need to be investigated as soon as possible. Emingzu put down the teacup and said, "Damn it," Li Yi already felt wronged. He had only been in the county government for a short while, and he hadn't even sat down for a long time, but there were already a lot of trivial matters to deal with. He couldn't help but complain. Halfway through his words, he remembered that the person sitting opposite him was the princess. Wasn't scolding her mother equal to scolding the empress? Insulting the empress was a crime of great disrespect, and it was punishable by death. Seeing that Mingzhu's face became cold, Li Yi immediately put on a smile. "Your Highness, how is your body? Is His Majesty's asthma better? According to what you said, I cleaned the palace several times a day and removed all the flowers and plants in the palace. The number of times my father's asthma has indeed decreased." A trace of softness appeared on Mingzhu's face as she said. Then she turned to look at Li Yi and said, "I know you don't want to be an official. How about this, as long as you fulfill your duties as a county lieutenant within half a year, I can write to my father and allow you to resign after half a year." "Is that true?" Li Yi was stunned for a moment. Then he looked at her and his tone became more serious. Half a year's time was not short, but it was not long either. But there was still something to look forward to. Her words just now were like a ray of light in the darkness, guiding Li Yi in the right direction. "Really?" Mingzhu nodded. Half a year's time was the deadline that she and her father had agreed on. Half a year's time was enough to train him a little. Slap hands as a vow. Who knew if she was just saying it casually? If she went back on her word, there was no evidence. Who could he find to reason with? The ancient people believed in this. Slapping hands meant that the vow was made. If he went back on his word, he would suffer the wrath of the heavens. Mingzhu glanced at him, but in the end she still reached out her hand to touch his. Li Yi took 2 steps back from her slap. His palm was slightly numb. He was extremely suspicious that she had used qi just now. "Alright, the vow has been made. Can we go and work on the case?" Mingzhu stood up, looked at him and walked out of the door. "Wait a minute." Before she walked out of the door, Li Yi's voice came from behind. "Is there anything else?" She turned to look at him. "Why don't you write a written pledge?" Li Yi looked at her with a hesitant expression. If she didn't believe in ghosts and gods, it would be the same whether she made a vow or not. It was better to write a written pledge. With a written pledge, there would be material evidence and he wouldn't have to worry about her going back on her word. Chapter 183. Under Li Yi's strong request, Mingzhu reluctantly wrote down the contract. The content of the contract was just like what she said just now. The contract would last for half a year. If Li Yi didn't neglect his duties and did what a county lieutenant was supposed to do, she would personally write a letter to allow him to resign after half a year. This condition was very lenient. Li Yi felt that he wouldn't do any worse than the previous county lieutenant Zhou. After half a year, he would be a good man again, with the receipt personally signed by the princess in his bosom. He immediately felt much more at ease. His dejection was swept away and he was in high spirits. In an instant, the elegant scholar turned into a dignified and handsome county magistrate. Lu Rui's training over the past few days had been very effective. At the very least, when he was serious, he looked like a completely different person. Seeing the sudden change in him, Li Mingzhu's eyes flashed with a strange light, and then she found it a little funny. What made him change so much was not a reward, but actually allowing him to resign from his position. It was the first time that she saw such a strange official. Autumn was actually the season to collect land rent. However, the benevolent emperor exempted Qing and prefecture and the neighboring prefectures from taxes for 2 years. There was no need to collect taxes during Li Yi's term of office. As for arresting thieves and trying cases, it wasn't that complicated. If anyone lost something, they would come to the yamen to file a case. The constables would symbolically investigate and find clues. Then they would find the thieves and everyone would be happy. However, most cases couldn't be solved. After a long time, they would be left unsolved. The rate of solving cases was actually very low. In this aspect, there was no difference from the future. Unless it was a major case or a lawsuit that involved human life, it had to be treated seriously. However, if such a case really happened, the most anxious person should be County Magistrate Lu. As a county lieutenant, he only assisted the county magistrate in investigating the case, so he didn't make Li Yi worry too much. Fortunately, there weren't many cases like this and there were only a few of them in a year. Most of the cases that needed to be dealt with were small cases such as fighting, theft, and robbery. Li Yi had already learned about these things from Lu Yi. Generally speaking, the county lieutenant's daily life was relatively leisurely. It wasn't as hard as he imagined. Just like the former county lieutenant Zhou, he usually stayed in the county government office. Things like patrolling the streets and maintaining public order were naturally done by his subordinates. He was basically a hands-off boss, and the busiest time was when he used public office for personal gain. When he spoke just now, he placed his hand on his chest. This is a very focused action, which means that what he said is very likely to be the truth. In the county jail, a man who was accused of theft was brought in. After a few questions, Li Yi explained to Mingzu. "Your Excellency, I really didn't steal anything." He didn't think that this unfamiliar lord would be willing to believe him. When the man heard this, he was startled for a moment before saying with tears and mucus flowing down his face. "Of course this is not absolute. It's just a possibility. But at least it can clear him of some suspicion and focus more attention elsewhere." As for the suspect just now, his answer seemed to be flawless, but when he was asked to tell the situation backward, he made a lot of mistakes, which means that he didn't do it at all. It's more likely that he was lying. Similarly, this can only be used as a reference and specific evidence is still needed. Mingzu looked at the scribe next to her, who was writing at a fast speed and recording down every word that Li Yi had said just now. Although she hadn't figured out the basis of Li Yi's theory for the time being, it was undoubtedly correct. Just now, several suspects were baffled by his interlocking questions. In the end, they contradicted themselves and gave themselves away in their words, so they had no choice but to confess. This was obviously a gentler and more effective interrogation method. If it could be summarized into a book and implemented by the Ministry of Justice in all the government offices, it could greatly improve the efficiency of the trial, reduce the use of torture tools, and benefit the people. It would be a great contribution. She had already asked someone to record what Li Yi had said in the court last time. During this period of time, she had tested it on many people. Although it didn't match every time, it was proven in most cases. "Did you think of all these things yourself?" Mingzu looked at him, her beautiful eyes full of doubt. This magical method of distinguishing lies required a lot of experience and meticulous observation. If it was suggested by an experienced official, it would be barely acceptable, but with his age and experience, this matter was really suspicious. "This matter, I have to start from a winter many years ago." Li Yi's face revealed a look of reminiscence. "Later, when he left to thank me for saving his life, the old man gave me an ancient book, which was written in the book." Li Yi used the name of the nameless old man again. "Where's the book?" Mingzu asked. "I lost it." Li Yi replied without a blush or gasping for breath. Mingzu knew that she couldn't get any truth from him today, but it didn't matter. There was still half a year, enough for her to dig out more useful things from him. When he left the county jail, he saw Lu Yishui still wandering in front of the duty room. Li Yi waved his hand and signaled him to come over. "Your Excellency, what's the matter?" Lu Yishui asked with a face full of smiles. "Go and get a map of the prefecture city." On the first day of County Magistrate Li's office, all the Yamen runners were gathered together. Arrestor Li had just announced that from that day on, they had to learn something every day. Every once in a while there would be an assessment. Those who failed the assessment 3 times could pack up and go home. Although these Yamen runners were also lowly people because they worked in the Yamen, they usually had to bow and scrape to the officials. In front of the ordinary people, they could be regarded as half an official. No one wanted to lose this ancestral rice bowl. In addition, County Magistrate Li also set some new rules. When they went out to patrol the streets, they would no longer wander aimlessly. County Magistrate Li divided the prefecture city into small areas, and each of them had their own jurisdiction. They only needed to be responsible for the security of their respective areas. This seemed to be a little easier, but everyone knew in their hearts that although they had a clearer division of labor, their responsibilities were also clearer. They could no longer have the thought of idling around in the Yamen by doing errands in the Yamen. Some people were happy while some were worried. Lu Yishui, who had been promoted by County Magistrate Lu to be the monitor, was one of the happy ones. After knowing that what they were going to learn was what County Magistrate Li showed in the court that day, which was a method to distinguish lies and make suspects confess without torture, they even faintly looked forward to the training class that County Magistrate Li mentioned. Chapter 184. At the behest of County Magistrate Li, a free training class for the constables and Yamen runners was officially held. Of course, County Magistrate Li was busy with official business and had no time to teach them personally. A literate scribe in the Yamen was the teacher for the time being. He held a booklet with County Magistrate Li's quotations and analyzed the specific cases one by one. The scribe had witnessed how County Magistrate Li tried cases with his own eyes, so he was very familiar with the process. At first, the Yamen runners just wanted to pass the test and keep their jobs. After listening for a while, they forgot about these things and showed an interested expression. Only then did they know that what the scribe taught them was the magical interrogation method of County Magistrate Li. As an ordinary Yamen runner, if he learned this, he would undoubtedly have a special skill and would be valued wherever he went. Just like Lu Yishui, no matter how fierce and tough the criminal was, he could only obediently sign in his hands. During this period of time, he had made many outstanding achievements and had become the right-hand man of County Magistrate Lu. Half a month ago he was just an ordinary Yamen runner like them, but now he had become a monitor which was envied by everyone. Of course, they didn't have Lu Yishui's talent, so they could only make up for it with hard work. It was impossible for them to become a monitor. It was their short-term goal to be valued by County Magistrate Li or County Magistrate Lu. The training class before him was undoubtedly a rare opportunity. Dainyu, tell me honestly, did you go to the brothel again last night? During the break, a skinny Yamen runner suddenly turned his head and asked another Yamen runner. Nonsense, I went home directly after leaving the Yamen office yesterday. The Yamen runner called Dainyu was stunned for a while, then his face turned red and he said with a flushed face. Hehe, you still dare to say no? You stuttered and didn't dare to look at me. The county magistrate said that you were lying. Since we are all men, we won't laugh at you. I just want to see if the method taught by the county magistrate is effective. The Yamen runner had already understood the situation when he saw the Yamen runner's expression, so he laughed and said, I didn't go. The Yamen runner called Dainyu controlled his emotions and said calmly. He thought to himself, why did County Magistrate Li teach us these things? What secrets would we have in front of them in the future? Even if you don't tell us, we know. Another bailiff smiled mysteriously and said, the packet of aphrodisiac you secretly hid is gone. You must have gone to a brothel. There's no need to be so complicated. Look at how listless he is today. Where else could he have gone last night? Another bailiff jeered. Dainyo's face turned as red as a monkey's butt. What was there to laugh about visiting a brothel? He spoke as if they had never visited one before. When he saw the scribe pick up the booklet again, he quickly changed the topic and said, it's about to begin. Listen carefully to Scribe Chen. If you miss out on anything and fail the test, be careful that you won't be able to keep your jobs. These words were quite a deterrent to the bailiffs. They stopped teasing Dainyo and immediately straightened their attitude and listened attentively. Li was very satisfied with the Yamen runner's humble and eager attitude. In the future, the employees of big or small companies would go through pre-job training before they officially started work. Although these bailiffs were old foxes in the Yamen, they were good at doing odd jobs and running errands. As an honorable people's Yamen runner, their professional knowledge was far from enough. He didn't want to know how County Magistrate Zhou managed his subordinates in the past. At least in his place, he still attached great importance to the training of his employees. The key was, the more capable and the higher their execution, the fewer things that needed to be handled by Li personally. In order to be a stable boss in the office, Li was not stingy at all. He copied all the FBI's methods of investigating cases and detecting lies. These books were already common in the future. He picked out some useful ones. As for how effective they were, it would depend on their talents. After they had more or less mastered these things, it was time to bring out books like Criminal Psychology, Abnormal Psychology, Young Justice Bao Shigong's Strange Case, and so on for them to broaden their horizons. The Yamen runners in ancient times were actually not as high and mighty as people imagined. They were the same as prostitutes and actors. These Yamen runners were usually hereditary. Their ancestors were all in this line of work. As long as they didn't lose an arm or a leg, they didn't need to be examined before they took up the post. When the father retired, the son could take over. With this kind of selection method, these Yamen runners naturally didn't have any ability to speak of. The way they spent their days in the Yamen was not what Li wanted. He didn't need to train them into independent detectives. At the very least, they should have some basic qualities and be able to handle some small disputes. Li was already very pleased that they didn't have to bother him with trivial matters. Through these 2 days of observation of the Yamen runners, Li discovered that the monitor named Lu Yi had some talent. When it came to interrogation by torture, he could often understand it with just a hint. He could be trained to be his right-hand man or something. It should save him a lot of trouble in the future. After pondering for 2 days, he set these rules for these Yamen runners. At the end of the day he just wanted to be a lazy county officer. He divided the responsibilities bit by bit according to the small areas. In the future there were area policemen, and now there were area detectives. If there was any small dispute in the area, they would first try to solve it themselves. If they couldn't solve it, there would be a small captain in every 5 areas. If the small captain couldn't solve it, they could report it to the chief captain, Lui, to deal with it. If even Lui couldn't do anything, then Li or Emingzu could only do it personally. Although Emingzu knew that Li did this to be lazy, it seemed to be reasonable after thinking about it carefully. She believed that Li didn't do it on a whim. It would be better to observe for a period of time before making a decision. Now, Li could barely understand County Magistrate Lu's mood. With such a princess as his subordinate, he couldn't beat or scold her, and he had to consider the opinion of his subordinate when he did things. Such an official was really aggrieving. After reading a few books in the duty room, he estimated that it was almost time to get off work. He planned to call Fong back. The moment he walked out of the door, he saw 2 yamen runners escorting a man in. Li originally planned to leave directly. When he saw the appearance of the man, he was slightly stunned and walked over there. County officer. Seeing him coming, the 2 yamen runners hurriedly saluted. The man raised his head and saw the young man in official uniform walking over. He was also stunned for a moment, and then a trace of joy appeared on his face. Chapter 185. What's going on? Li walked in front of the 2 bailiffs and pointed at the man. One of the runners was stunned for a moment, and then immediately said, "Your Excellency, this man hurt people maliciously. We caught him on the street and are about to take him to the county jail." Benefactor. At this time the man also reacted. He looked at Li and said with surprise. When the 2 runners saw this scene they were immediately puzzled. Could it be that he knew the county lieutenant? It's just a small matter. Don't mention the word benefactor anymore. Li waved his hand to the man and then asked the 2 runners, "Tell me the details. What's going on?" The burly man in front of him was the man he met the last time on the street when he solved the silver theft case. That day he was stolen by the middle-aged scholar, and the 2 of them were arguing endlessly over the ownership of the silver. In order to get away from Li Mingzhu, Li made a bet with him on this matter and unintentionally helped him. At this moment he still had an impression of him. The man was very filial to his mother and didn't seem to be a criminal. It was not easy to stay in the county jail. Even if he was not tortured, it would be uncomfortable to stay there for a few days. If it was not a big deal, it would be okay to let him go. Seeing that the county magistrate was interested in the case, the yamen runner immediately told him everything he knew. Only then did Li know that the reason why the man was arrested was that he had hurt a shop assistant in the medicine shop. It was said that the shop assistant was greedy for a small profit and sold moldy medicinal herbs to the man. The man's mother was seriously ill, and after drinking the medicine she almost died. It was with great difficulty that she managed to keep her life. After learning the truth from the doctor, the man was immediately angry. He rushed into the medicine shop and beat the shop assistant half to death. 2 passing runners happened to see him and arrested him. Although the shop assistant was wrong, it did not cause any serious trouble. Instead, the man beat him half to death and deliberately hurt him, so he was taken back to the government on the spot. "What's your name?" Li asked the man. "Sir, I am Wu Er." The burly man originally wanted to call him benefactor, but when he thought of what Li had just said, he immediately changed the way he addressed him and imitated the 2 bailiffs. Li turned his head to look at the 2 bailiffs and asked, "Is that fellow's injury serious?" One of the runners shook his head and said, "Even though his face is bruised and swollen, making him look terrifying, there's no danger to his life. He'll be fine after a few days of rest." Li nodded his head and said, "Take him back to prison, and every day he will have to be fed 2 meals in prison." This Wu Er is worried about his mother, and his filial piety is commendable. It is understandable that he acted on impulse. If there is nothing serious with the shop assistant, then let him go. The 2 bailiffs were stunned for a moment, then they immediately nodded. "Yes, sir is right." The 2 let go of the man. Seeing that he was still standing there in a daze, one of them slapped his head and said, "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and thank the county lieutenant." The burly man came back to his senses, and a trace of joy appeared on his face. He immediately knelt down and said in a loud voice, "Thank you, county lieutenant. Thank you, county lieutenant." It was unknown where these people learned to kneel when they saw an official. Li wanted to help him up, but the man's strength was not small. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and steadily kowtowed twice. All right, stop kowtowing. This time it was because of your filial piety. In the future, think more before you act. If you have any problems, you can come to the government for help. Don't be so impulsive. Li Yi waved his hand and said. The burly man laughed and thanked him several times. Worried that no one would take care of his mother, he hurriedly left. Sir is so benevolent. I admire you. Ignoring the flattery of the two bailiffs, Li Yi waved his hand casually, called Fang from the back hall, and walked out of the county government. In this era, the working hours of officials were very different from those of the future. Because the main officials such as the county magistrate and the county magistrate lived in the government, they had to go to work at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. But they also got off work early. They could go home at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. According to the unified rules, except for some important festivals, the officials had a rule of 1 day off every 5 days. That was to say, every 5 days they worked, they could have a day off to go home and take a bath. It was quite scientific. However, Li Yi was a special case in the county government. Perhaps Emingzu found her conscience and wanted to make up for what she owed him, so she relaxed many rigid rules for him. He didn't have to live in the county government, and he didn't have to go to work early in the morning. He was much freer than the county magistrate. Li Xian kept his word. Last time he promised to give Li Yi a good horse, and Li Yi had received it a few days ago. Unfortunately, he hadn't learned how to ride a horse. The horse was temporarily requisitioned by Lu Rui. She seemed to like the horse very much. Since she requisitioned it, she didn't mention returning it. It was not only Li Yi's dream to ride a horse in fine clothes and travel the world with a sword. During this time he had a lot of contact with Lu Rui. She liked the martial arts novels told by Li Yi the most. Every time Li Yi talked about those martial arts heroines, her eyes would shine. As his sister-in-law and martial arts coach, she had said that she would teach Li Yi how to ride a horse, and Li Yi had been looking forward to it for several days. He imagined that it must be very cool to ride a horse on the road in fine clothes. If he had a long sword like Lu Rui's, he might really look like a hero. Li Yi did not really like the saber that was given to him by his superiors. There was a saying that the sword was the leader of all weapons. In his impression, heroes usually used swords. When he thought of sabers, the first image that popped up in his mind should be a group of rugged men, each holding a large saber in their hands, rushing down the mountain, shouting, "This mountain is mine, this tree is planted by me," and so on. The feeling of incongruity was too strong. If there was a chance in the future, he would change to a sword. He always thought that Lu Rui looked very cool when she used a sword. Her expression was cold and her sword was silent. If he was in Jianghu in the future, he could give himself a nickname of Deadly Fairy, which would probably shock a lot of people. Thinking about it carefully, the Princess Arrestor looked quite cool in her uniform with a knife on her waist. However, no one had ever seen her draw her knife. But thinking about the way she slashed around with her knife, no matter how cool she looked, it was all gone. After bargaining with Emingzu, Li Yi's life did not change much after he became the county lieutenant. He came down from Willow Village in the morning and went back in the afternoon. The only difference was that the place he stayed in during the day had changed from Rui Square to the county government office. It had just entered winter and it had not snowed yet, but the weather was already a little cold. When he went out in the morning, he told Xuanhuan to wait for him to come back in the afternoon for hot pot. At this time they were probably already preparing. After walking into the village, Fang went back directly when he passed by the gate of his house. Li Yi continued to walk for a while. When he just stepped into the yard, he saw Sister Rui and Xuanhuan in the yard. Besides them, there was also a strange woman in the yard. The woman looked to be in her 30s or 40s. She wore colorful clothes and looked quite festive. At this time she was saying something with a smile on her face. Seeing Xuanhuan running towards him, Li Yi looked at the woman with some doubts and asked, "Who is she?" The little maid showed a bitter expression and said in a low voice, "She is the official matchmaker. This time she came to urge second miss to get married quickly. This year she has been here several times." Chapter 186. Official Matchmaker? Li Yi was slightly taken aback by Xuanhuan's words. Previously he had mistaken 10,000 gold as 10,000 taels of gold, which was extremely embarrassing. In order not to make such a low-level mistake again, he took some time to study the common sense of this world. Of course, this included etiquette, customs, and customs. Official matchmakers were also matchmakers, but they had an additional official identity compared to ordinary matchmakers. At this time, although there was no birth control, the population was still very small. Medical standards were still limited and the average lifespan of people was not long. It was considered lucky to live to 50 years old. Every additional day of life was a blessing from God. If the population base could not be increased, it would lead to many problems. Without a population, where could the country find people to farm? How could the country collect taxes? If there was a war, where could they find people to join the army? How could they resist the foreign enemies? How could they maintain the prosperity of the nation? Therefore, every king regarded increasing the population as the top priority of the country's development. Since a few hundred years ago, early marriage and early childbearing had become a law and regulation that encouraged more children. Those who had more children would be rewarded, and those who had fewer children would be punished. There was even a law that a girl's entire family would be imprisoned if she did not get married before the age of 15. Although the marriage laws of the Jing kingdom were not so harsh, under the encouragement of the government, everyone was working hard to get married and have children. You're a 17 or 18-year-old girl who's still waiting to get married. Isn't this dragging the country down? Therefore, in addition to ordinary matchmakers, the profession of official matchmaker was also born. Any profession, as long as it was related to the word official, was not that simple. The official matchmaker's responsibility was to respond to the call of the country to solve the lifelong problems of unmarried men and women of the right age. If the other party did not agree, they could even force them to be matched. Based on the concept of, if you don't want to get married, I'll help you, these official matchmakers traveled from village to village. When necessary, they could also force two single dogs of the right age to be together. Every time they did something good, not only would they receive a gift from the man's family, the government would also give them a certain reward. This greatly increased their enthusiasm. Lu Rui was 16 years old. In the future, she was still a young girl in her prime. However, in the current era, she was undoubtedly an old lady. This kind of old lady was naturally the focus of the official media. Miss, it's not that I want to scold you, but you're not young anymore. How many women your age have children that can call mother? Look at you, how many times have I come to your house? How many marriages have I talked about? Why don't you get it? In the courtyard, the official matchmaker with a mole on the corner of her mouth was still talking incessantly. Lu Rui had a helpless look on her face. Lu Rui's gaze was fixed in front of her. Her eyes were wandering, and it was obvious that she was distracted. The official matchmaker's mouth did not stop. Suddenly, he asked curiously, I remember that when I came last time, your sister wasn't married either. It's only been a few months. How did she get married? I wonder which matchmaker arranged it. Why didn't she register it with the authorities? Her tone was a little regretful. She was responsible for the marriages of men and women of the right age in Willow Leaf Village and the nearby villages. If she could arrange a marriage, she would inevitably be rewarded. If someone else took it away, she would have nothing to do with it. If she knew which matchmaker was so unruly, she would definitely teach her a lesson next time. In this line of work, one must abide by the rules of this line of work. She could not stretch her hand too far. Lu Rui did not speak. The reason why she made that decision some time ago was not only because of Second Aunt and the others, but also because the official matchmaker had come to her house countless times. If it was delayed for a while, she was afraid that she would be fined. At that time, they did not have any extra food at home. The official matchmaker looked at Lu Rui and said, Miss, I didn't mistreat you at all. Miss, you are so beautiful, and I can't bear to say bad things about a bad family. Last time you were not satisfied with Blacksmith Wang's eldest son, so this time I left the best for you. Although Master Su's son is a little silly, he has a cloth shop in the prefecture city. He has maids and servants and a big house. He doesn't lack anything. If you marry him, you will be the mistress of the Su family. What do you think? If you agree, I'll immediately reply to Master Su's letter, and the marriage can be settled within these 2 days. If it drags on for too long and Master Su agrees to someone else, then there's nothing we can do. There's a large group of people squeezing into the Su family's door. There was still no change in Lu Rui's expression, as if she did not hear the official matchmaker's words. Miss, I can't help you delay this marriage any longer. If you still don't agree, I'm afraid the higher-ups will send people to punish you soon. The official matchmaker tried to persuade her. Li found it a little funny when he heard this. Maids, servants, and a big house. Tempting Fong with such conditions might work, but Mississippi Lu was someone who had seen the world now. The money she had saved up was probably enough to empty out the cloth shop. The official matchmaker was originally confident about today's marriage. She knew the situation of the young lady's family. A few months ago they were so poor that they could barely eat. Although the Su family was not a wealthy family, and it was an exaggeration to say that she would marry them and become the mistress of the Su family, at least she would not have to worry about food and clothing. Wouldn't it be 1,000 times better than here? As she thought about this, her gaze swept across the two sisters. Suddenly, her expression froze, and then astonishment appeared on her face. The last time she came, they were dressed in ordinary clothes. Today, these two sets of clothes were probably worth a lot of money. Looking at the hairpin in the elder sister's hair, she felt that it was vaguely familiar. After thinking for a while, she remembered that she had seen it at the most famous silver shop in the prefecture, Golden Jade Lane. It was worth at least a few dozen taels of silver. After so many years of hardship, of course, Lu Rui would not be so extravagant as to spend a few dozen taels of silver to buy a golden hairpin. This hairpin was given to her by Li Yi some time ago. However, she did not know that the official matchmaker was also puzzled. It had only been a few months since they last saw each other. Could it be that the two sisters had made a fortune? However, even if they had really become wealthy, they still had to get married. If it was delayed any longer, it would not be as simple as the punishment of rations. Li Yi was standing nearby watching the bustle. The courtyard door was suddenly pushed open. Fang had just walked in and saw Li Yi. He rubbed his head and said embarrassedly, "Sonny, the cloth that you gave to my family last time, do you still have it?" Zhuzi was playing with fire at home today and accidentally burned the cloth. "I gave him a beating." Li Yi did not wait for him to finish and ordered the little servant girl, "Go to the room and bring another roll of cloth out." Fang was considered a wealthy person now and could afford a roll of cloth. But the significance of the cloth given by the emperor was different. If it was burned by Zhuzi just like that, he would probably be heartbroken. Li Yi silently mourned for the naughty brats, but for a while. Xuanhuan nodded her head and ran briskly into the room. After a while she came out carrying a roll of cloth. The last time the emperor rewarded them with too much cloth. They had given out a lot and there was still a large pile left. It would not hurt to give a few more rolls to the little servant girl. The official matchmaker watched as the little servant girl with a silver hairpin ran past him. When his gaze swept to the silk cloth in her arms, a trace of surprise appeared on his face again. This is good material. Chapter 187. The official matchmaker was also a matchmaker. Although a matchmaker only relied on her mouth to turn white into black, she spent her days running around and building bridges. Naturally, she was more knowledgeable. She did not train her eyes for nothing. Even without personally touching the cloth in the servant girl's hands, she could tell that the material was not ordinary. In Qing and Prefectural City, this kind of cloth could only be found in the top-notch cloth shops. She felt very strange in her heart. What exactly had happened to these two sisters in the past few months? The last time she came, their family situation was still very difficult. Not long after, even the little servant girl was dressed in silk and satin. The price of the silver hairpin in her hair was probably more than her annual salary. In this way, even the servant girl in their family was treated like a young mistress. It was normal for them to look down on Master Su's family. However, seeing that it was almost the end of the year, she still needed to matchmake a few more couples to reach the required number. She raised her head to look at Lu Rui and said, "Miss, you can't ask for too much. Marriage is about matching families. We can't reach a higher level. If you still don't understand, the next time you come, it won't be me." The official matchmaker's words were vague, but Lu's sister Rui understood. The next time it wasn't her, it would be the officials. If it was a few months ago, even they would have a headache over such a matter. But now this kind of threat had no effect. Lu Rui saw Li Yi walking over and greeted him, "Hubby, you're back." The official matchmaker also turned his head and saw the handsome young man walking over. Hearing Lu Rui's greeting, he immediately understood that this must be the woman's husband. Looking at the situation, he must be marrying into the family. This young man was handsome. It would be a pity if he married into the family. How much betrothal gift is the Su family willing to offer? Li Yi turned his head to look at the official matchmaker and asked with a smile. Hearing this, Lu Rui's expression changed. A dangerous light flashed in her eyes as she looked at Li Yi. "Husband." Lu Rui tugged at his sleeve and shook her head. She and Lu Rui had depended on each other since they were young and had a deep sisterly bond. To her, she naturally did not want Rui to marry someone she did not like. The official matchmaker was stunned. Judging from the scholar's attitude, there seemed to be room for negotiation. A hint of joy appeared on his face as he said, "You can rest assured. Master Su's family is rich. I believe the betrothal gifts will definitely satisfy you. If the Su family is willing to pay 10,000 gold taels as a betrothal gift, this matter is not impossible to discuss." Li Yi was still brooding over the previous matter. What? When she came to her senses and was about to scold him, she suddenly remembered that he had just said, "County Lieutenant." She was shocked again. She had long heard that the previous county lieutenant Zhou had been removed from office and a new county lieutenant had come to the yamen, but she had never seen him before. Could it be this young man in front of her? Although she still had some doubts in her heart, she thought that no one would dare to fake this kind of thing. She looked at Li Yi with a slightly respectful expression and asked, You are the county lieutenant? Li Yi took out the county lieutenant's waist token and waved it in front of her. It's all my fault for offending you just now. Please forgive me, Your Excellency. Seeing the waist token, the official matchmaker had no doubts in her heart and immediately said with a panicked expression. Before Li Yi spoke, she said again, Don't worry, Your Excellency. This girl's marriage will be decided by herself. There will be no official matchmaker in the future, and the higher-ups will not send anyone to urge her. Thinking of what she had just said to the county lieutenant, the official matchmaker wanted to slap herself a few times. At this moment, she hurriedly said to make up for it. Although she did not have such power as an official matchmaker, as long as she revealed a little of the county lieutenant's intention, those people would definitely not dare to make things difficult for the county lieutenant's family. At this moment, Li Yi felt that it was not bad to have the identity of a county lieutenant. At least it would make many things more convenient. He waved his hand to the official matchmaker and said, You just said that after getting married, where should we go to register? Don't worry, Your Excellency. After going back, I will take care of this matter properly. The official matchmaker said very sensibly. Who would have thought that this sister would be so lucky to have a relationship with the county lieutenant? If she had known earlier, she would not have dared to put on such an attitude just now. After being reminded by the official matchmaker just now, Li Yi realized that marriage also needed to be registered in this era. After thinking about it carefully, he realized that he and Rui had actually been an illegal couple for so long. Lu Rui's gaze froze when she saw him calmly talking to the official matchmaker about this matter, and the expression on her pretty face became slightly absent-minded. After registering with the government, they would be a real couple. Registering with the government required the birth date and horoscope. Li Yi converted it according to his birthday in his previous life. When he turned around, he saw Rui standing there in a daze. He stretched out his hand and waved it in front of her eyes. He asked doubtfully, Rui, why are you in a daze? He's asking for your birth date and horoscope. Chapter 188. After seeing his waist token, the official media's attitude immediately took a 180-degree turn. He spoke politely and respectfully, and the wrinkles at the corner of his eyes could even blossom. Li Yi finally understood why the scholars in ancient times had sharpened their brains to drill into the officialdom. Realizing their life ambitions and serving the country were all said for others to hear. Of course, there was no lack of people who were really loyal to the emperor and loved their country, but most of them only cared about the limitless glory and the power in their hands after becoming an official. After all, even a small county lieutenant of the 8th rank could not be underestimated in a district or a county. No wonder so many people flocked to the imperial examinations every year. If they were lucky and could get an official position, they could bring honor to their ancestors and reach the pinnacle of life. If it wasn't for the fact that he had lived 2 lives and was used to being lazy, not wanting to be restrained by the rules and regulations of the officialdom, and not having much pursuit for these things, he might not be able to resist the temptation of being called county lieutenant by so many people for a long time. After the official media finished asking what he needed to ask, he immediately took his leave. He was afraid that everything would be settled by the next morning. Before she came, Xuanhuan had already prepared the charcoal stove. After such a long delay, the stove fire had long been extinguished, so she hurriedly went to light the fire. As usual, the mutton was cut by Lu Rui. The knife in her hand danced up and down at an extremely fast speed. Li Yi could not see her movements clearly, but the mutton she cut was as thin as a cicada's wing. The knife skills were exquisite, which made him extremely envious. After washing the vegetables with Lu Rui outside, the stove fire was also blazing. They first put some in the pot and the whole family waited patiently around the stove. Li Yi would teach Xuanhuan a new dish every few days. Most of the time Lu Rui would also follow along and learn. Now was not like a few months ago. Every meal was porridge and white flour. Even on normal days the meals were exceptionally sumptuous, but to say the most popular was still the hot pot. Whether it was the ancients or the modern people, this thing had a mysterious charm. Especially in the cold season, it was even more comfortable to eat. After a few days, when it was snowing and freezing outside, the whole family would gather around the stove to eat hot pot. That was the true enjoyment. Old Fang became addicted to it after freeloading for a meal. He made a mandarin duck pot from a blacksmith in the prefectural city, took it home and poured all the meat, vegetables, seasonings, oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar and so on into it. Halfway through, Zhuzi couldn't help but vomit after taking the first bite. Li Yi walked around the yard for a while to digest the food, and he thought about how he should be lazy tomorrow. He sat in the county government office and drank tea all day, and he went to the latrine a lot. He was so bored that he was going to be moldy. A graceful figure walked past him, bringing with it a faint fragrance. Without looking up, Li Yi knew that it should be Lu Rui, who had just taken a bath after dinner. It was her favorite perfume. "Follow me," Mississippi Lu said lightly and walked out of the door. Seeing that she went to the newly built stable to get the horse, Li Yi was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately showed a trace of joy on his face. Was she finally going to teach him how to ride a horse? Li Yi had been thinking about this for a long time. In just a moment, he came to himself and hurriedly chased after her. In this life, including his previous life, he had only ridden a horse twice. No, it should not be said to be riding. The first time was when Fang grabbed him to lie on the horse and he fainted because of the bumpy ride. The second time was when he was still pressed on the horse by him, and it was still bumpy all the way. After getting off the horse, he held the willow tree by the moat and vomited for a long time. At that time, he secretly swore in his heart that he must learn how to ride a horse if he had a chance in the future. Although he might not be able to ride a horse in fine clothes and travel to the ends of the world with a sword, at least he would not be embarrassed when he encountered such a thing in the future. The horse that Li Xian gave him was indeed a good horse. It had a wide forehead, big and bright eyes, bright and full of expression, big and straight hooves and no messy hair on its body. Li Yi had seen in a book about horses that a horse that looked like this could be regarded as a hero among horses. Of course, the most intuitive way to distinguish it was that after Lu Rui commandeered the horse, she did not intend to return it to him. After passing through the stockade village and walking for a while, he could see a flat grassland. When Li Yi walked over, Mississippi Lu was waiting for him there with the horse. Chapter 189. When Li Xian ordered the servants of the prince's mansion to send the horse over, the saddle and other supporting facilities were very complete. Try to get on the horse first. Seeing Li Yi walking over, Lu Rui handed the reins in her hands to him. Li Yi took the reins from her hands and looked a little dazed. Just like that? He had read those books about riding. Before getting on the horse, shouldn't one first familiarize himself with the horse and then try to get on it so that the horse wouldn't be scared and put himself in unnecessary danger? Forcing himself on the horse, it didn't seem right. If the horse went crazy after he got on it, it would be a tragedy. Li Yi didn't think that he could subdue a crazy horse with his current strength. This horse is docile, it won't be dangerous. Lu Rui seemed to see through his thoughts and said calmly. Being looked down upon by Mississippi Lu as a man, of course, he couldn't show his timidity. Li Yi grabbed the reins and the mane at the root of the horse's neck. He stepped on the pedal and with a little force he flipped himself over. He was no longer a weak scholar now. This set of movements was smooth and elegant. However, before he could sit firmly on the horse's back, the horse let out a long neigh and jumped high with its front hooves. Li Yi lost his balance and fell backward. Fortunately, he had some skills now. He held the reins firmly and clamped his legs tightly on the horse's abdomen. The falling momentum slowed down and his body stabilized again. He thought that this posture must be very cool. It would be great if someone could take a picture from afar so that such a cool posture could be preserved forever. While he was thinking, a white shadow soared into the sky and landed steadily on the horse's back behind him. Lu Rui slapped the horse's abdomen. The horse let out another long neigh and actually quieted down. Seeing that the fellow under him had finally calmed down, Li Yi heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, but his face was a little dark. This horse actually knew how to bully the weak and fear the strong. If he were to ride on it, it would want to throw him off its back. If it were Lu Rui, he would be as obedient as a grandchild and would not move at all. Wasn't he looking down on them? Hold the reins tight and clamp the horse's belly. Lu Rui reminded him and patted the horse's belly lightly. Li Yi then realized that this guy who bullied the weak and feared the strong started to trot. Riding on a horse was not as comfortable as Li Yi had imagined. The ride was very bumpy. In his previous life, he had even gotten dizzy from taking public transportation. However, the problem of carsick did not seem to be brought to this place, so he did not feel much discomfort. Lu Rui was explaining the technical essentials of horseback riding to him in detail, but Li Yi was not in the mood to listen. The space on a horse's back was originally small, so it was a little crowded for two people to ride on it. Even if Lu Rui deliberately kept a distance from him, their bodies would inevitably touch each other due to the bumpy ride. Feeling the soft feeling on his back from time to time, Li Yi was surprised. This little girl usually looked like she did not show anything, but in fact she was quite sexy. He had underestimated her in the past. Then he, who was not uncomfortable at first, gradually began to feel uncomfortable. Do you remember what I said just now? Lu Rui asked after telling him all the important details. What? Li came back to his senses and then remembered that he did not remember a word of what Lu Rui told him just now. Lu Rui frowned slightly and realized that his mind was not on this at all. Just when she was about to speak, the horse suddenly stopped. She subconsciously tightened her grip on the horse's belly, but her body still leaned forward a lot. Her whole body was lying on the back of Li. Feeling the softness on his back, Li was a little stunned. He was sitting in front and saw an irrigation ditch in front of him. He thought that the horse would stop soon, so he was prepared and did not lose his balance. But then Lu Rui's body pressed tightly against him. There was only one thought in his mind at this moment. Before today he really underestimated her. This sudden situation was also unexpected for Lu Rui. When she realized that her chest was pressed tightly against Li Yi's back, she thought that along the way just now, it seemed that a rare trace of embarrassment appeared on her cold face. The next moment she jumped off the horse's back. When the feeling on his back disappeared, Li Yi felt a sense of loss. He pulled the reins and the horse suddenly turned around. When Li Yi looked up, he could only see a white shadow floating into the distance. "Where are you going?" he shouted. The shadow paused for a moment, then disappeared even faster. "Wait a minute, come back, at least tell me how to get off the horse." After a while, when the white shadow completely disappeared from his sight, Li Yi stared blankly in that direction and murmured, "It's still separated by clothes, it can't be." He sighed and took one of his feet out of the stirrup. Just when he was about to jump off the horse suddenly jogged forward. Li Yi almost fell off the horse. He quickly retracted his feet and clamped his legs tightly on the horse's belly. He could not help but curse in his heart, "This bastard, he's here again." From afar, he saw a group of naughty children rolling on the other side of the grass. Li Yi shouted loudly, "Lu Xiaohu, go and get your sister Rui to come over." It was Lu Xiaohu's first time seeing a teacher riding a horse. After a moment of shock, he nodded his head and ran in the direction of the village. When Lu Xiaohu called for help, Li Yi was still lying on the back of the horse that was running around. Lu Rui was stunned at first, then she jumped over the horse's back and easily grabbed Li Yi's shoulder, bringing him down from the horse. At the same time, she held the horse's reins with her other hand. The horse still wanted to run around, but it could not break free from the reins in her hand. After Lu Rui glanced at it, the horse that was running around immediately calmed down. Since ancient times, it had always been the hero saving the beauty. Today the beauty saving the hero. Li Yi looked at the horse that had calmed down in Lu Rui's hands. He had some doubts in his heart. Did this guy have intermittent mental illness? Did he go crazy as long as he was alone on the horse? He no longer wanted to ride a horse. He heard that horse meat tasted pretty good. He wondered how it would taste in hot pot. Would it taste better than mutton? If there was a chance, he must try it. His first attempt at learning how to ride a horse ended in failure. Lu Rui's beautiful eyes were filled with doubt. Just now Rui said that she would teach Li Yi how to ride a horse, but now there was no trace of her. However, she had always been like this since she was young. She did not have the patience to do things. Next time it would be better for her to teach him personally. After tying the horse back into the stable, Li Yi saw Xuanhuan walking over with a bundle of straw. He called out to her, "Son-in-law, what's the matter?" The servant girl looked up at him. "Put the straw back first." "Why?" The servant girl blinked her big eyes and looked at him. "Right now is the time to feed the horse. Let's starve it for 3 days first." A trace of anger appeared on Li Yi's face as he said through gritted teeth. Chapter 190. Xuanhuan had always been obedient to Li Yi's words. Although she was still puzzled as to why the son-in-law wanted to starve the horse for 3 days, she knew that the son-in-law was right, so she put the horse straw back. Lu Rui walked in from outside and watched as the servant girl walked back with the straw in her arms. She asked, "Xuanhuan, has the horse been fed?" The son-in-law said to starve it for 3 days. The servant girl shook her head and said, "Give me the straw. You can go back to your work." Lu Rui took the straw from her hands and walked towards the stable. The servant girl responded. She looked at Lu Rui's back as she left. The son-in-law didn't allow her to feed the horse, but second miss insisted on feeding it. What if the son-in-law was unhappy? Forget it. She didn't want to think about it anymore. She would let the son-in-law and second miss solve this matter themselves. Thinking that she hadn't fed her little rabbit, the servant girl shook her head. She took some fresh vegetables from the kitchen and walked into the inner courtyard. When Lu Rui walked into the stable with the straw, Li was squatting on the soft ground in front of the stable. He was holding a brush and a piece of white paper. He seemed to be making a rubbing of something. The sound of footsteps came from behind him. Li stood up, and when he turned around he saw Lu Rui walking over with the straw. Li saw that there was nothing wrong with her expression. The straw didn't look like she was hiding a weapon, so he felt slightly relieved. After all, what happened on the horse was purely an accident. It had nothing to do with him. Although Mississippi Lu didn't have a good temper, she wasn't an unreasonable person. She didn't draw her sword and cut him, so she probably wouldn't take revenge later. However, just in case, it was better to confirm it first. He looked at her warily and asked, "About what happened just now?" "I didn't." "Shut up." Lu Rui pretended as if nothing had happened. She did not want Li to mention this matter. A trace of blush appeared on her pretty face again. She threw the straw into the food trough and glared fiercely at Li before turning around and leaving. This time, Li was finally relieved. It seemed that Mississippi Lu really didn't intend to care about this matter. However, it was the first time that he saw her blushing pretty face. The heroine of a generation turned into a shy little girl. Li really couldn't adapt to it in a short time. In the stable, the crazy horse that bullied the weak and feared the strong was eating the straw and snorting. Li raised his head and glanced at it. This time, for the sake of Rui, he would let it go. If it didn't know what was good for it next time, he would starve it for 3 days first. Otherwise, it wouldn't know how many eyes the Horse King had. With white paper and a brush, he drew the horse's hoof prints according to the real size on the soft mud around the stable and ordered some horseshoes from the blacksmith. Although this horse didn't give him much face, it was undeniably a good horse. It would be a pity if the horseshoes were worn out. The blacksmith's craftsmanship was good. Li told him the requirements and got 4 horseshoes the next day. Out of professional habit, the blacksmith didn't ask Li about the use of these things. He had been a blacksmith for many years, so he certainly knew the rules of the trade. Fang held 4 strange things in his hand and asked in confusion, "Young master, what are these for?" "Horseshoes." "What's this thing?" The doubts on Fang's face were deeper. "What is horseshoes?" Listening to the name, this thing seems to have something to do with horses. However, Fang has the experience of raising horses and is no stranger to things related to horses, but he has never heard of horseshoes. It's the shoes for horses to wear. There are no horseshoes in this world, so it's no wonder that Fang has no knowledge. Li explained to him. "What?" Fang stopped suddenly and couldn't believe his ears. He looked at Li and asked, "Horses need to wear shoes?" "After living for decades, I only know that people need to wear shoes, but I have never heard of horses wearing shoes." "Isn't this a joke? We both run on the ground. You need to wear shoes. Why don't horses need them?" Li looked at him and asked. Fang wanted to scold, "Nonsense," but he held it back before he could say it. "Walking barefoot without shoes will grind your feet. Stepping on stones will hurt you. Horses don't know pain, so why wear shoes?" Fang said confidently. He suspected that the young master was bewitched today. He suddenly wanted to put shoes on horses, and would he have the idea of beating cows and sheep in a few days? "You also know how to grind your feet. Horses run much more than you do. After a long time, the horse's hooves will be worn out, and the horse will be useless." Fang was stunned for a moment and said, "Young master, that's unnecessary. That horse only runs back and forth between the prefectural city and the stockade every day. It's only a few miles and the worn-out hooves will grow back. But, according to what you said, the war horses in the army are often used, and the speed at which their hooves grow can't keep up with the speed at which they're worn out, so it's necessary to wear shoes." This time, Fang understood what Li meant. He used to raise horses and knew that horses had to be used in moderation. If a horse was tied in the stable all day and not taken out to run, the horse's hooves would grow deformed. If it ran for a long time every day, the horse's hooves would be worn out. The former could still be saved, but the latter could only become useless. The young master's method was very good. After his reminder, Fang already understood that this strange thing probably needed to be nailed to the horse's hooves. Although the horse at home couldn't use this method, if the war horses in the army had this treasure, they would no longer have to worry about the horse's hooves being worn out. After listening to Fang's words, Li was stunned for a moment. He only remembered that in the novels he read in the past, the protagonist invented horseshoes and immediately shocked the emperors and ministers. They would exclaim that such a simple method had never been thought of before, and they would be rewarded with money and an official position. He subconsciously thought that all horses should be nailed to the horse's hooves. After listening to Fang's words, It seemed that he really made an unnecessary move this time. However, since the horse's hooves had been nailed, it would be a waste of the money paid to the blacksmith if he didn't put it on the horse. 2 days ago this guy had lost face in front of Rui. Later he would ask the yamen runners to help tie this guy up and nail the horse's hooves. Presumably, this guy who bullied the weak and feared the strong had never seen such a situation. It was scared half to death. If it still behaved atrociously in front of him next time, he would eat horse meat hot pot in front of it. When Li Yi and Fang went down the mountain this time, they deliberately brought the horse down to nail the horse's hooves. In the open space not far from the county yamen, with the help of Fang, the yamen runners easily put down the horse and tied it up with its hooves facing the sky. The huge horse's eyes were full of fear and it let out a long neigh. However, its 4 feet were tied up and there were so many people around it that it couldn't struggle even if it wanted to. When Fang was about to nail the horse's hooves according to the method Li Yi said, a voice suddenly came from behind. "What are you doing here?" A woman wearing a yamen runner's uniform walked over. Chapter 191. Hey, it's you, Arrestor Li. Fang knew that the female arrestor in the yamen was not an ordinary person. Li Yi had also specifically warned him not to provoke her. Fang stopped what he was doing, turned around and explained with a smile, "Young master said that if we nail the horse's hooves, we won't have to worry about the horse's hooves being worn out." Emingzu watched as the yamen runners held down the horse. The man who had been following Li Yi stuck a strangely shaped iron piece on the horse's hooves one by one and fixed it with iron nails. He stood there and fell into deep thought. The maintenance and replacement of horses in the army cost a lot of money every year. More than 90% of horses were scrapped because their hooves were too worn out. Without hooves, horses naturally could not charge and break through enemy lines. Over the years, no one had thought of solving the problem that had troubled generations of emperors and ministers with just a few small iron pieces. After the iron pieces were nailed on the horse's hooves, the yamen runners dispersed. The horse immediately stood up and was led by Fang. It kept spinning on the spot, and the horse's hooves stepped on the bluestone slabs, making a clear sound. Anyone with a discerning eye could see the use of the iron pieces at a glance. After the iron pieces were nailed on the horse's hooves would not be in contact with the ground. This way the horse could avoid being worn out. It only needed to change the iron pieces after a period of time. From then on, the imperial court would not have to worry about the huge amount of horse expenses every year. The service life of a warhorse would be greatly extended. In the long run, how much money would be saved? Emingzu was different from Li Yi and Fang. She was the princess of a country. When she thought about problems, she would often think from the perspective of the country. In a short moment she thought of these things. It could be said that the contribution of this small iron piece had surpassed all the previous contributions, including writing rules for disciples, teaching cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and that novel interrogation method. These were not the work of a day and night, and could not be compared to the direct benefits created by this iron piece. "Where is Li?" She stepped forward and looked at Fang, her eyes slightly moving. In the county office." Fang felt guilty under her gaze, so he pointed to the county government and said, Li Yi was in the county government. All the work had been assigned to him. After sitting in the duty room for a long time, he felt bored and decided to go out for a walk. After all, the county magistrate was one of the most powerful people in Anshi County. How could he always sit in the yamen? The higher his official position was, the more he had to mingle with the people. Therefore he planned to take a stroll on the streets and experience the hardships of the people. Of course he could also take the opportunity to relax. Before he could walk out of the gate of the county government, he was blocked by Emingzu. "What's up?" Li looked at her and cursed his bad luck. He should have left a long time ago. Normally, if he bumped into her at the yamen, nothing good would come out of it. "How did you come up with the idea to nail the iron under the horse's hooves?" Emingzu looked at him and asked. She was very curious. Why did he think of a problem that no one had thought of for thousands of years? Because if the iron is nailed, the horse's hooves won't be worn out. Li Yi said matter-of-factly. Emingzu was slightly stunned. His answer seemed to be nonsense, but after thinking about it carefully, it seemed to make sense. The difference was that he was the only one who had thought of this for so many years. Looking at the expression on Mingzhu's face, Li Yi knew that he might not be able to experience the hardships of the people on the streets today. As expected, after a while he returned to the duty room and wrote down the manufacturing method of horseshoes, how to nail the horse's hooves, and how to change the horseshoe in detail. There was no concept of patent in this world. It seemed that this time, the invention of horseshoes was destined to be given to the country, and it was destined to be a one-way trip. Mingzhu's bad habit made Li Yi feel that his remaining value was squeezed out. He received a meager salary as a county magistrate, but he did great things that benefited the country and the people. The salary he received was seriously inconsistent with the value he created. The evil feudal society was more exploitative than the capitalist society. After Li Yi finished writing, Mingzhu put the papers into an envelope. Without even saying a word of thanks, she disappeared in the blink of an eye. Li Yi shook his head and sighed. At the same time, he lamented that he had met the princess. Send this letter to the capital at the fastest possible speed and hand it over to Imperial Father personally. Not long after, in an exquisite courtyard in Qing'an Prefecture, Mingzhu handed the envelope to an armored man. Don't worry, princess. I will definitely hand this letter to His Majesty as soon as possible. The guard of the princess's residence responded solemnly, flipped onto his horse and quickly disappeared from sight. Just how much more ability does he have? Mingzhu muttered to herself as she looked ahead, her eyes slightly dazed. Lord Qin, why don't I give you 10,000 taels of silver and you solve the problem of changing warhorses this year? In the imperial study of the imperial palace in the capital city, a man with a square face and a dignified expression waved his sleeves and glared angrily at another person opposite him. The person opposite him laughed bitterly and said, Lord Yen, 10,000 taels of silver is not a small amount. Last year's disaster was severe and a lot of money was spent on disaster relief. This year, the taxes of a few provinces have been reduced and the national treasury is not full. Besides, a few days ago, the Ministry of War has already allocated 100,000 taels of silver. Now that Lord Yen is asking for 50,000 taels of silver, where do we have that much money to give you? The man frowned and said, that 100,000 taels of silver is the army's provisions and pay. Don't confuse it with this matter. Lord Yen, please don't make things difficult for the Ministry of Revenue. 10,000 taels of silver is the limit we can give. The Minister of Revenue looked at the man opposite him and showed no signs of relenting. The man huffed coldly and said, recently the border has been in a state of emergency several times. Sooner or later we will have to go to war with the Qi Kingdom. At this critical juncture, our Jing Kingdom doesn't even have usable warhorses. Don't tell me Lord Qin doesn't know the importance of this matter? Hearing this, the Minister of Revenue did not say anything else. He could not bear the consequences and looked pleadingly at Emperor Jing, who was sitting at the top. In the imperial study, Emperor Jing watched the two ministers of the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Revenue oppose each other. Neither was willing to give in to the other. He rubbed the space between his brows and felt a headache coming on. The cost of horses had always been an important expenditure. In previous years perhaps it could be postponed. However, at this time, the border was in a state of emergency and could not be delayed at all. After some consideration, he decided to postpone other expenditures. The money that was to be allocated to the Ministry of War could not be skimped on. Just as he was about to speak, Changde, the chief housekeeper, pushed open the door and came in. He walked to his side and whispered a few words in his ear. A letter from Mingzhu? A trace of confusion appeared on his face and he said, let him in. Read it. Changde said loudly to the outside of the hall. The guard of the princess's residence walked in from outside the door. After kneeling and bowing, he presented the letter in his hand. He had traveled day and night and changed horses several times at the relay station. Without any delay, he finally arrived at the capital. Emperor Jing opened the envelope and took out a letter written by Princess Yongle. After reading it, a trace of astonishment appeared on his face. Then, he hurriedly opened the few pieces of paper in the envelope and read them. The smile on his face gradually widened. This Li Yi is indeed my lucky star. Emperor Jing slapped the few pieces of paper on the desk and said with a laugh. In the hall, the two ministers looked at each other with confusion on their faces. Chapter 192. Cough, cough. In the end, Jing Emperor was suffering from asthma. Now that he had solved the difficult problem, he was happy and laughed a few times. However, he could not catch his breath and coughed violently. Changde's expression changed and hurried forward to support him. Jing Emperor stroked his chest. After a moment, his breathing finally calmed down. Official Yen, you said that a large number of warhorses need to be replaced every year. Most of it is due to the wear and tear of the horse's hooves. What if there is a way to prevent the horse's hooves from getting worn out? Jing Emperor smiled and looked at the Minister of War Yen Bing. Yen Bing was stunned for a moment. He bowed and said, Your Majesty, if there is such a way, the annual cost of war horses can be reduced by more than 70%. He paused and said, "It's just that. Since ancient times, countless people have tried to prevent the horse's hooves from getting worn out, but no one has ever succeeded." Yan Bing naturally knew that if the horse's hooves could be prevented from getting worn out, then there would be no need to spend so much on horses. However, the problem was that for so many years, people in the Ministry of War had been studying and trying to solve this problem. They had done countless experiments, but all of them had ended in failure. If this matter was really as easy as His Majesty said, how could no one solve it for so long? "Changda, show these to official Yan." Jing Emperor smiled and handed him the paper with the strange pattern. Yan Bing took the pieces of paper from Changda's hands, feeling very puzzled. From the looks of it, could it be that someone had really solved this ancient problem? Full of curiosity and doubt, he cast his eyes on the paper. The first thing he saw was a strange pattern in the shape of a semicircle. He stretched out his index finger and thumb to make a gesture, and then continued to read the words below the pattern. "Horseshoe." He murmured and read in a low voice, "Nail this on the horse's hooves to avoid direct contact between the hooves and the ground. There is no need to worry about the horse's hooves getting worn out. If the horseshoe is damaged, just replace it with a new one." As his eyes moved down, Yan Bing held the paper and stared at the pattern on the paper. He was stunned. It's so simple. At this time he had forgotten that he was in the imperial study. His beard trembled and he couldn't help but say loudly, "A problem that had troubled countless people for thousands of years could be easily solved with just a few small iron bars. Why hadn't he thought of this before?" Moreover, after the hooves of the horses were equipped with iron bars, they would be able to adapt to even harsher environments. No matter how much gravel there was on the ground, as long as the hooves of the horses did not come into contact with the ground, they would not have to worry about the hooves being worn out or cracked. The safety of the cavalry and the war horses would be guaranteed, and their battle strength would definitely rise to a new level. I don't know which hero came up with such a wonderful method, only using a few cheap iron bars. From now on, there will be no need to worry about the horses' hooves being worn out, and it can also save a lot of money for the national treasury. I congratulate Your Majesty." Yan Bing put away the paper and said excitedly. The Minister of Revenue saw that Yan Bing seemed to have changed into a different person. He didn't mention anything about the horse fairs at all. He was curious about the contents of the piece of paper. What could have made His Majesty and the Minister of War so agitated? "I didn't expect that this time he would solve a difficult problem for us, the ruler and the minister." Emperor Jing was in a good mood. He touched the short beard on his chin and said, "I originally wanted to let him train there for a few years before transferring him to the capital. If I reward him again and again, I'm afraid that it will breed his arrogance. Forget it, I will remember this credit for him for the time being and calculate it all in the future." Changde naturally knew who the he that Emperor Jing was talking about was, but the two ministers were confused. They only knew that the emperor attached great importance to this person who had come up with the plan and seemed to entrust him with great power in the future. They just didn't know who this person was. After all, they had been the ruler and the minister for so many years, but they had never seen His Majesty attach so much importance to anyone. Li Yi had waited for several days, but Emingzi did not mention anything about rewards. Well, this time he had really worked in vain again. Perhaps she treated a few small iron bars as treasures. The emperor and the court did not care about them at all. This woman had long hair and short knowledge. She made a fuss when she saw a novel thing and made him look forward to it for nothing. He thought that the emperor would reward him with a few acres of land and a few bolts of silk. Then he would not have drawn those pictures and written those words in vain. It seemed that he had thought too much. It was really boring in the yamen. He changed into casual clothes and leisurely walked out of the yamen without asking Fang to follow him. Qing and Prefectural City was the center of Qing and Prefecture's culture, economy, politics. Anyway, it was the center of everything. Except for festivals, it was usually very lively. Li Yi wandered on the street inspecting the people. Along the way he saw many acquaintances. The Liu family's candied haws had now taken root in the prefectural city. On every street, there were Willow Leaf Village villagers holding candied haws. Most of them were from the Liu family. Sometimes when they saw Li Yi they would warmly greet him. Every day they only needed to hold a stick full of candied haws and stand there. They didn't need to shout or hawk their wares and business would automatically come to them. Every day they would bring back a lot of copper coins. Such an easy way to make money, they didn't even dare to think about it a few months ago. Although they still had to hand over half of the profits, which made them uncomfortable, The remaining half was enough for them to live a comfortable life that they didn't even dare to think about before. Fong and the others were the first to sell candied haws. For a period of time, the business was handed over to their wives or trusted relatives. Now, the supplies of Rui workshop were all provided by the prince's mansion. The workshops in the village had stopped, so they were all free. Sometimes they would come here to have a look and supervise. As the earliest employees, they all had dividends from the profits of Rui dew and spirits. At the end of every month they just had to sit at home and count the money. When passing by Rui workshop, Li stood at the door and looked around. There were many customers. At first, the girls were a little unfamiliar with this place. Now they had taken care of everything here. He looked at it from afar and didn't go in. Next to Rui workshop was the Hua market. Li had been there once before. In ancient times, there was a lack of entertainment activities. Naturally, it couldn't be compared to the cinema or KTV in modern times. But now he had no choice. Listening to a few songs and watching a few songs and dances was much better than sitting in the county government office and staring blankly. The Hua market was very spacious. There were many temporary viewing sheds. They were very simple and were surrounded by railings. Inside there were opera singers, dancers and singers. After paying 10 copper coins at the door, one could enjoy the performances here. Of course, these viewing sheds were the lowest level of entertainment. Most of the people who gathered here were ordinary people who were not well off. In addition to these viewing sheds, there were theaters, tea houses, pubs and even brothels. Of course, these places were more high-end and ordinary people couldn't afford them. The one that Li Yi went to last time was a larger-scale brothel. In terms of luxury, it couldn't be compared to those restaurants and brothels with green bricks and glazed tiles. But it was much better than those simple viewing sheds. "Sir, what would you like to order?" It was still the waiter from last time. When he saw someone coming in, he asked with a smile, "What do you have here?" Li Yi had drunk a lot of tea in the government office recently. Moreover, the tea here didn't taste good. He didn't plan to drink it this time. "Tea," the waiter said with a smile. "What else?" "Only tea." The waiter smiled a little awkwardly. Chapter 193. In the end, Li Yi still asked the waiter to serve him a pot of tea. He sighed in his heart that the manager of this brothel had no business sense at all. He was so bad at doing business. For entertainment places like this where people gathered, they refused to bring their own drinks. They just provided fruit drinks and popcorn. The price was a few times higher than outside and they could earn a lot of money. If there was no popcorn, they could change it to a fruit platter, secret desserts, or even 2 skewers of candied haws. In the future, KTV did not rely on singing and drinks to earn money. If the service was more complete, they could keep the customers, and they would not be reluctant to spend money. He thought about it for a while and listened to the storyteller on the stage while waiting for the waiter to serve the tea. The storyteller was an old man. Li Yi had just entered in the middle of the story, so he did not know what the story was about. The few people sitting in the audience were listening enthusiastically. When they heard something exciting, they would throw a few copper coins on the stage. The old man smiled and told the story even more enthusiastically. At the crucial moment, the old man suddenly stopped and stood up. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, today's story ends here. If you want to know what happens next, please listen to the next chapter." Just when the story was about to end, the old man's words made the audience unhappy. "You old man, why are you keeping us in suspense? Continue." "I'm just listening to the story." "What is this? Next chapter? Nonsense. I'll give you some more copper coins. Let's continue." The audience muttered a few words and took out the copper coins from their pockets and threw them on the stage. "Since all of you have spoken so highly of me, this old man will continue speaking." Seeing the copper coins on the ground, the wrinkles on the old man's face bloomed like a chrysanthemum. He had already stood up, but he immediately sat back down and cleared his throat. "Let's talk about that." This old man's trick was quite common. Those storytellers or actors would stop a performance at the end of a show or at a critical moment. They would charge the audience and then continue their performance. This was very common in the brothels of Hua City. After all, the tips made up most of their income. In fact, the customers also knew the rules. Although they scolded them a little, they would still give them the tips they deserved. Li Yi was very disappointed that the old man did not leave. To be honest, the old man's story was dull and did not interest him at all. Originally, he thought that it would be good if the old man finished his story and changed to a good program to pass the time. He did not expect the old man's tricks to be so deep. "Forget it, I'll just put up with it. Seeing this old man getting high here is much better than sitting in the yamen on duty. At the very least, I won't have to encounter the princess who has repeatedly tricked me." He looked in the direction where the waiter had left. That fellow's movements were really slow. It had been so long and the tea still wasn't served. At this moment, on the side of the stand, a young girl poked her head out and looked at the young man sitting at a table not far away. Her pretty face showed a puzzled expression. She murmured, "Strange, isn't that the young man who sent Sister Ruoqing back that night?" She stretched her head out and was about to take a closer look when an ugly face suddenly appeared in front of her. The girl was so scared that her face turned pale. After taking a few steps back, she fixed her eyes on the face and said angrily, "Lin de Bao, are you trying to scare me to death?" The waiter clutched his stomach and said with a complicated expression, "Xiaozhu, help me take this pot of tea to that young man over there. I think I have a stomachache." The waiter pointed at the teapot on the side and ran away after saying that. The girl patted her chest. She was really scared just now. She mumbled something before picking up the teapot and walking over. Li was still thinking about whether he should complain about the waiter's efficiency later. He saw a girl about 15 or 16 years old come over and put a pot of tea on the table next to him with a slight smile. She said, "Young master, your tea is here." The waiter didn't come. The one who brought the tea was a girl with delicate features. Li was slightly startled. Then he poured a cup of tea. After waiting for such a long time, he was indeed a little thirsty. The girl brought the tea, but she didn't leave immediately. She blinked her big eyes and looked at the handsome young man in front of her. She felt that he was very similar to the one who sent Sister Ruoqing back that night. However, it was too late at that time and she didn't see his appearance clearly. Naturally, she wasn't too sure now. That night, she kept asking Elder Sister Ruoqing who that person was, but Elder Sister Ruoqing was unwilling to tell her. She had also never mentioned what had happened in the manor to her. Later on, she only found out about it from a familiar elder sister. She didn't know the details. She only knew that when those bad people bullied Sister Ruoqing, there was a young man who stood up for her. She should have seen him that night. After pouring the tea, Li saw that the girl didn't leave. Instead, she stood there and looked at him with a strange expression. He asked doubtfully, "Little girl, what else do you want?" "I'm not a little girl," the girl said in her heart. She showed a sweet smile and asked, "Does this young man know Sister Ruoqing?" "Sister Ruoqing?" Li was stunned. "You mean Miss Ruoqing?" She looked up at the girl in front of her and finally saw some familiar figures. Although she only took a glance, she still had some impression of the girl who opened the door. She said, "You opened the door that night? Hee, it really is you." The girl's pretty face bloomed with a smile. Knowing that the young man in front of her was Sister Ruoqing's friend, she became more relaxed and sat opposite to Li. "My name is Xiaozhu. What is young man's name?" The girl heard about what happened in the prince's mansion that day from others. She had a good impression of the young man who helped Sister Ruoqing, so she took the initiative to talk to Li. "Piglet?" Li didn't have time to tell the girl his name. He was surprised by the name Piglet. How could such a lively girl have such a name? He didn't know what her parents were thinking. Although it was popular in this era to have a cheap name, but for a girl to have such a name, how much criticism must she have suffered since she grew up? The girl saw Li Yi's expression and knew what he was thinking. After all, since she was young, many people laughed at her because of this matter. Her real name was naturally not Xiaozhu but Xianxia. Only people who were familiar with her would call her that. Originally, she felt that this young man was handsome and familiar with Sister Ruoqing, so she was naturally closer to him. However, thinking that he actually misunderstood her name, the girl couldn't help but pout. "Stupid young man, my name is Xianxia, the Pearl of Zhuyu, not the kind with a long nose and big ears." She pouted and muttered a few words. Of course, the first 3 words were said in her heart. After listening to the girl's explanation, Li Yi realized that he misunderstood her name. In order to cover up his embarrassment, he took a sip of tea and asked, "When will this storytelling end? What's the next performance?" The girl wrinkled her nose and asked, "Is Grandpa Sun's storytelling not good?" "It's just so." The old man didn't have it easy, so Li didn't belittle him too much and said casually, "Grandpa Sun is the best storyteller in the brothel. His stories are also the most popular in the market. Many people like his storytelling. It's not ordinary." The girl was a little unhappy with what Li Yi said. Chapter 194. Grandpa Sun? Listening to the way the girl addressed him, she seemed to be quite familiar with the old man. However, although the old man's storytelling ability was very good, the story itself did not appeal to him. Li looked at the girl and said, "Young lady, you have heard a few stories. scholars devoted themselves to poetry and imperial examinations. Although there were novels and legends in this world, they were crooked ways in their eyes. They were far from being prosperous. A few ghost stories could scare a large group of people. The girl was at most 16 years old. She had not heard many stories. It was very likely that she was fooled by the old man's words. "I'm already 16 years old this year." The girl looked at him unconvinced and said. Of course she was not convinced. The young master in front of her was at most 2 or 3 years older than her. Even if he was a scholar, she had grown up in a brothel and had heard many stories told by scholars since she was young. After so many years, how could she be convinced when Li Yi said in a childish tone, "How many stories have I heard at such a young age?" She had been trained as an actress since she was a child. After listening to stories for a long time, she was familiar with these routines. Even if she was asked to go up and say a paragraph now, it would not be a problem. Li Yi saw the stubbornness on the girl's face. He felt a little funny in his heart. He took a sip of tea and asked, "What stories have you heard?" "A lot." The girl curled her lips and said a lot of things as if she was showing off a treasure. Li Yi was a little surprised. He did not expect this girl to have heard a lot of stories. In order to kill time, he would sometimes buy some popular ghost stories on the market, novels and legends. However, after reading them a few times, he found that the content inside was dull and lacking in imagination. It was better to find books in the library. Of course, it might be because he came from the 21st century. His knowledge was much more than the ancient people here. There was never a lack of these in the library. The stories that circulated in the streets were novel enough for the people here. Among the books that the girl had just mentioned, many of them were inferior novels that he had seen in the market before. There were also some that he had never heard of, but this was not surprising. This world was similar to a parallel space. Although the historical trajectory before the Tang dynasty did not change much, the details were very different. Some famous people did not exist, such as Li Bai and Du Fu. There were also many unfamiliar names. As for the literary works, of course they were different. The little girl's tone was filled with dissatisfaction, showing off, and contempt. However, in front of a scholar who only knew how to study, she indeed had the right to be arrogant. Looking at the proud expression on the girl's face, Li Yi smiled and asked, "Little girl, you've heard a lot of stories?" "Of course." The girl's expression became even more proud, but after a moment, it froze on her face. "Have you heard of the legend of the white snake?" Li Yi looked at her and asked with a smile. "What? Legend of the white snake?" The girl was slightly startled and gently shook her head. "What about Journey to the West? A Chinese ghost story, painted skin?" As the girl shook her head, she began to doubt her life. She thought that she was very familiar with the current popular stories, but she had not heard of any of the ones that Li Yi had just mentioned. She did not suspect that Li Yi had casually made these up to deceive her. Just by hearing the names, she knew that these were stories that she had not heard of. Painted skin, what is that? I have never heard of it. The girl's eyes turned and she looked at Li Yi with her big eyes. They were not having a good time now. Whether it was storytelling or acting, they were all old-fashioned stories and scripts that lacked novelty. The number of spectators that they could attract was decreasing, and they urgently needed new stories or scripts to attract more customers. Otherwise, they might not even be able to maintain the most basic of living. However, good stories and scripts often sold for a very high price, and they could not afford to hire those talented storytellers. Just now, when she heard those unheard stories from Li Yi, the girl could not help but have ideas about him. Just now, Li Yi had said a lot, and the girl only remembered the last two, a Chinese ghost story, and painted skin. Ghosts and whatnot sounded a little scary, and she was most afraid of listening to ghost stories. The girl pondered in her heart and chose the other one. Li Yi took another sip of tea and had no intention of telling a story. Every time he told a story, it was like a 3D movie in front of him, and the picture was especially strong. Last time he wanted to tell a ghost story to scare Lu Rui, but he ended up scaring himself. He would not be foolish again. Seeing Li Yi's indifferent expression, as if he was unwilling to tell a story, the girl bit her lip, as if she had made a difficult decision. She took out a folded handkerchief from her pocket and placed it on the table in front. Li Yi looked at the bulging handkerchief, and he did not know what the girl wanted to do. The next moment, he saw her open the folded handkerchief and said with some reluctance, "This is the osmanthus cake made by Sister Ruoqing. It is very delicious. Tell me a story and I will treat you to this, okay?" Looking at the pastries on the table that emitted a faint fragrance, Li Yi could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Osmanthus cake made by Ruoqing. It was really a nostalgic taste. Deal? Li Yi pinched a piece of osmanthus cake and put it in his mouth. The osmanthus cake in this season should be made with dried osmanthus and ground into powder. Although the taste was not as good as when the osmanthus bloomed, it was not much worse. The girl did not know that she had accidentally taken out a temptation that Li Yi could not refuse. Seeing that he was willing to tell a story, a smile bloomed on her pretty face again, and she hurriedly sat up straight. She thought that when he told the story she must secretly write down the story and tell it to Grandpa's son later. That way there would be a new story to attract customers. The Painted Skin was a very classic story in Strange Tales from Liao Zhai. There were many changes in modern movies and TV series, and some love and resentment were added. No one knew what kind of adaptation it had become. Li Yi could not find these scripts in the library, so he could only tell the original story of Pu Songling. Strange Tales from Liao Zhai was so popular in ancient times, and in this similar world the effect should not be bad. Using it to scare people was also very good. Looking at the girl's excited expression, Li Yi could not help but have a little bit of wicked interest in his heart. A long time ago, there was a scholar in Qin and Prefecture called Wang Sheng. He went out in the morning and met a beautiful girl who was carrying a bag and hurrying on her way. Wang Sheng was puzzled. A weak girl was hurrying on her way before dawn. Could it be that she had some difficulties? He hurriedly followed her. The girl's face showed an expression of interest. So it is a story of a scholar and a beauty. It sounds good. Chapter 195. The woman said that her parents wanted to sell her to a rich family as a concubine. She couldn't bear it, so she secretly ran away. She didn't know where she wanted to go. Wang Sheng saw that the woman was beautiful and traveled alone. He was tempted and invited her to his home. In order to see Rui's frightened expression, Li Yi had told her the story of the Painted Skin. Now he was familiar with it. He ate the osmanthus cake given by the young girl and drank a cup of tea to moisten his throat before continuing. The young girl had a general idea of what kind of story this gentleman was telling based on her years of experience listening to books. The scholar named Wang Sheng helped the woman who was in a hurry. The woman was grateful and decided to stay at his house. The two of them spent a long time together and fell in love with each other. When Wang Sheng was studying hard at night, the woman would stay by his side. Finally, her hard work paid off. Wang Sheng went to the capital to take the imperial examinations and became the top scorer. He returned to his hometown in glory. From then on, the two of them lived happily together and became a story to be told. If the plot was even more bizarre, after Wang Sheng became the xuanhuan, he was chosen by the princess or the daughter of the prime minister, and became the son-in-law of some high-ranking official. The woman waited at home every day, but there was no news of Wang Sheng. So, she packed her luggage and traveled thousands of miles to the capital to act out the story of searching for her husband. She had heard stories like this since she was a child, and her expectations for the story told by the young man in front of her had dropped a bit. However, there was one thing that made her curious. The name of the story seemed to be Painted Skin. What did Painted Skin mean? Was Wang Sheng's painting skills very exquisite? Wang Sheng and the woman spent a few days together. One day he was bumped into by a Taoist. The Taoist turned around and saw Wang Sheng. He was very surprised and asked Wang Sheng, "What happened to you recently?" Wang Sheng shook his head and denied it. The Taoist said, "You have evil energy lingering around you. How can you say nothing?" Wang Sheng tried his best to defend himself. The Taoist shook his head and said, "What a fool. There are people in this world who don't realize that death is at hand." After listening to this part, the young girl's expression became a bit confused. Wasn't he going to the capital to take the imperial examination? Why did the Taoist priest come out? What did he mean by, "death is near"? This story seemed to be different from the stories she had heard before. Thinking of this, the girl's curiosity was fully aroused, and the expression on her pretty face gradually became serious. When Wang Sheng returned home, he discovered that the courtyard gate was blocked from the inside, and he couldn't enter. Could it be that this young man was sent by someone else to mess up the place? When he saw the guests slap the copper coins on the table in front of him, and there was even a piece of silver among them, the old man was even more determined in his heart. Snatching business here, those people were getting more and more overboard. Here, the reward is for you, continue to tell the story. After the first man put a few copper coins on the table, several people followed suit. The evil ghost painted on human skin. The story told by the scholar just now was much more exciting than the one told by the old man on the platform. Several people mistook him for a new storyteller, and when they took out their rewards, they were much more generous than when they threw money on the platform. Although the girl didn't put any copper coins on the table, she still looked at Li Yi with longing in her eyes. What about the rest of the story? For people thousands of years in the future, a horror story like The Painted Skin was simply too weak. The atmosphere of horror was far from comparable to those 3D horror blockbusters. But this was ancient times, and half of Strange Stories from a Chinese studio was enough to scare timid people into not daring to go out at night. It was said that when the first The Painted Skin was filmed in Hong Kong in the 60s, many people believed it to be real, and after watching it they were scared to death. However, although it sounded scary, many people liked this kind of thrilling feeling. Li Yi couldn't understand this girl's behavior. She was obviously scared to the point that her face was pale, so why did she still want to listen? Even if she wanted to listen, he didn't dare to continue. When the 3D movie was playing in his mind, if she screamed a few more times like she did just now, Li Yi wasn't sure if his little heart could take it anymore. Being responsible for the young girl's young heart, and not letting her have some lingering trauma, Li Yi decided to stop here. I'll tell the rest of the story when I have the chance. Under the girl's stunned gaze, he stood up from his seat and packed the rest of the osmanthus cake to take away. After a few steps, he turned back and kept the copper coins on the table. Although the money was a little less, at least it was his own labor and it was shameful to waste it. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.